All right, hello. Thank you all for being here. I'm joined by my colleagues, President of Subways, Craig Cipriano to my right, and Chief Safety and Security Officer, Patrick Warren to my left. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I'll be very brief. We're just going to give a couple of updates on how last night went and our expectations going forward, and then we'll take any of your questions. Pleased to report that we got through night one. I think, as I said earlier today, I think that due to massive amounts of planning work from literally, certainly hundreds, potentially thousands of people, and certainly hard work by thousands of people overnight, we got through the night doing, I would say, better than I ever had a right to expect us to do, given how quickly we were trying to plan this and execute. In a different world, if we were going to execute on something like this, we would take at least months to plan, if not a year. And this New York City Transit team came up with a plan and executed it in a matter of days, and it's incredibly impressive. So I want to just thank again every member of our workforce for their Herculean efforts to make this happen. This is the single largest cleaning and disinfecting program we've ever undertaken by a mile. We know this has been a big change for those who count on our service overnight, and so I want to thank them again for their patience. This has been a trying few months, and on top of everything else, we've now changed the commutes of a bunch of essential workers who ride the subway overnight, and so I'm grateful to them for their patience as we work through this. So going to last night, we monitored the situation around the clock. Many of us were spread out across the system. Many of us started the night at 96th Street and 2nd Avenue. I spent the evening at 241st Street, Wakefield, in the Bronx, with Patrick Warren. Pat Foy was in Coney Island. Craig Cipriano was in Queens, and at Casey Stengel Depot. And I know Sally was throughout the system as well. I believe she was also at Coney Island. So the good news is we were able to clean and disinfect, we believe, basically every train car that was in service. Our tracking is not perfect yet, but over the course of 24 hours, we know that we hit at least almost everything. I actually think we probably did hit everything, and we hit some cars more than once. We also had an opportunity to test some of our new products and sprayers, so that we had folks out in the field who were testing some of the antimicrobials and the electrostatic sprayers. I saw at least 2 different versions of sprayers, had conversations with cleaners about how they were feeling, about how they were working, and I know that the sprayers are definitely leading over the old just squeeze and wipe system. So we are off looking for as many sprayers as we can find. More than 700 cleaners were working last night. We'll be increasing that presence further in some areas. I started this all off by saying that we will learn as we go, and every day we will get a little bit better. We will have some lessons learned, and one of the lessons that we learned last night was we were that we could have used a couple more cleaners in a couple different places. And so we've had the team, first thing this morning, we did a lessons learned call to figure out what we needed to tweak today so that we were improved tonight. Folks have been executing on that all day, so we'll probably have a couple additional cleaners in some places tonight. Over the last 24 hours, we have had more than 2,500 employees working to clean and disinfect stations and trains, which is just an unbelievable investment. The biggest news, I would say, concerns our bus service. Earlier in the week, meaning Monday and Tuesday, which feels like a long time ago, we moved an average of 8,300 essential customers on our buses over the overnight. So again, earlier this week, during the hours of 1 to 5, we moved about 8,300 customers on our buses. Last night, that number went up to 14,500. So that means another 6,200 customers rode our enhanced bus service to get where they needed to go last night. That is a 76% increase in overall ridership. And again, huge kudos to Craig Cipriano and his team and the planning team, who were able to build enhanced bus service and schedules to meet the needs of all of those folks. The numbers are more impressive when you break it down by borough. There was a 209% spike in ridership in Manhattan, a 98% spike in the Bronx, 87% spike in Brooklyn, 52% spike in Queens, 31% spike in Staten Island. So again, clearly the bus service that we built over the last couple of days was used last night, which is great news. So just the facts on that again, we added 1,168 new bus trips. We ran an additional 344 buses for a 150% increase of our operational fleets. Obviously, we will share these numbers with you so that you don't have to try to remember them, write them down right now. We enhanced service on 15 routes in the Bronx, 20 in Brooklyn, 10 in Manhattan, and 16 in Queens. We also completed 244 trips through the Essential Connector program where buses were not workable. We expect that number to grow, and in fact, I am not yet sold on that number being perfectly right because I believe that it's off a little bit. But it shows that bus service is working, and then where it's not working, where commutes are going to be particularly long and unworkable for people, where they're going to be more than two transfers, we're connecting people with vehicles so that they can get where they need to go. On that program, I want to make one other announcement. Starting a couple hours ago, we launched a new feature for that program that allows customers to pre-book their travel, which is obviously important, so they can actually arrange now for their ride tonight, which we believe will, for good reason, relieve a lot of stress so that people can know during the day that their ride for that night is booked, rather than have to wake up in the morning and book it in the middle of the night. The way that they will do that is to call 718-330-1234. Obviously, that number is on our website, but that's how they will pre-book the car service. And we are not able to pre-book the car service on the website at this moment. They have to call that number, but that should make life easier. And again, as we move along, we'll get better at this, and I am confident that very soon you will be able to pre-book that trip on the website. I want to just say one more time a huge thanks to the NYPD and to the city for their partnership last night and going forward. There were, I believe, more than 1,000 NYPD officers in our system last night. In every interaction that I saw, the officers, treated those who were leaving the system with respect and grace and kindness, and they were incredibly efficient, and they were a presence that was helpful in the system and on the platforms. And I'm really grateful for their service and for their willingness to work with us on this challenge. I think everyone has seen the numbers from the mayor and from others on the contacts that were made with individuals experiencing homelessness last night. There was a large group of folks who left the trains, left the system. That number's in the thousands. There is 252 people who were in extended interactions with outreach and social workers to engage about social services, and 139 individuals who accepted services and relocated to a shelter or a hospital. That's a good first step. We've been doing this work for many months, and that is a big number. It tends to take many conversations with individuals to get them to a point where they are comfortable to take up our offer on social services. And so I think that's great news, and I commend everyone who worked on it. And then finally, obviously, we just continue to ask for people's patience as we move forward. Tonight is night 2, and we'll learn from night 1. And then tomorrow night will be even better than we are tonight. So thank you, and happy to take anyone's questions.
And just a reminder to the reporters who are joining us by Zoom, if you raise your electronic hands, it's a good way to get our attention. You can try it the old-fashioned way and wave, and we'll try to look for that too. First question from David Meyer of the New York Post. David.
Hi, Sarah. This question is regarding, we heard reports of homeless people after leaving the subway system at 1 a.m., shifting to buses. Bus operators we spoke to were concerned by that. So I'm wondering if that's a concern that you share, whether you heard reports of overcrowded buses last night, and what you think needs to be done to address it.
Yeah, so certainly this was part of our planning. So we recognized that this could be an issue. We flagged it. I actually think we talked about it yesterday or the day before. We flagged this for NYPD. They are aware of it. Craig and I had several conversations about it. We talked about it last night and went back and forth. You know, I'll let Craig say more. I know that we were vigilantly checking on this last night. There were very few reports from bus operators of poor experiences. And also, we were also vigilantly checking for crowding conditions, and there were very few instances of any kind of crowding as well. And so, you know, I have no doubt that individual bus operators may have had concerns or complaints. We tried to address this early, though, and make sure that all of the bus operators were reminded that if they ran into any kind of issue at all, that they should contact the command center, and the command center would reach out to the police. And we got very few reports, but that doesn't mean that the few reports that we got aren't valid. So we'll stay on this. But Craig, you may want to address that as well.
Yeah, I think Sarah did an excellent job at answering. I would just add that, again, we said from the very beginning, we'll continue to be flexible, nimble. We'll continue to work with our partners at NYPD and continue to tweak the plan wherever we see we need additional buses, potentially for overcrowding, or if we do see a trend in homelessness, you know, we'll work closely with the PD. We did have a handful of reports yesterday, and we were able to work and try to address those.
Next question from Greg Mocker, Pix 11. Greg.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Good. Thanks. I'm sure you heard some people that might have had lines waiting for a bus, or one came, or some came together. I got some notes in Queens, along Queens Boulevard. I think you probably saw them too. Is there a tweak that's happening tonight? Did you see that there were some areas where people had a longer wait, perhaps? And what will happen kind of with the service on the ground moving forward then?
Yeah, great question. And again, I'll let Craig jump in as well. We actually were just talking about this morning. I mean, in some places along Queens Boulevard, we think some people were taking local buses when they could have been taking express buses, and could be moving along quickly. So it's one of the things we learned from day one, and we're going to try to make sure that people recognize that we can prioritize that express service for them.
So interesting you mentioned, Greg, about Queens Boulevard. I spent about an hour or so specifically on Queens Boulevard. I took the Q60 up and down and spent some time just watching the ridership. I personally did not see any overcrowding, any excessive waits on bus stops. But the one thing that we did recognize, what Sarah had mentioned, is that, you know, when I got on the Q60, I specifically asked customers whether or not they're using the Q60 tonight as an alternative to the E and the F train and where they were going. And sure enough, about a handful of customers that I spoke to told me they were headed into the city. And it was kind of interesting that they said that, because the Q60 is a local bus heading down Queens Boulevard. The best option is actually to take the X68, which is one of the express buses that we added to the enhanced network. And it goes from 78th and Queens Boulevard directly into the city. So I think some of that is about our customers learning the new network, us doing an even better job via the website and social media, getting out these enhancements. And I think as we move ahead, you know, this network is going to serve even more and more customers in a better way. But again, I just want to reiterate that yesterday, and you know, I'm really excited about this. We're all excited. 6,200 customers actually avail themselves of this enhanced network. So, you know, for night one, we're all really excited that was the performance.
On to Alfonso Castillo of Newsday. Alfonso, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I was hoping you could tell us more about these products that you're testing that claim to be effective for potentially months at a time. I know you've said that there are several products that are being tested. Can you tell us how they work? Do they share a technology in common? And have they already been proven in other settings? Do the vendors claim that they've used them in certain places? And already seen results?
Yes to all of the above. So, as you can imagine, during this moment and going back many weeks now, many companies are coming out of the woodwork to tell us that they have the absolute best solution for us. And so, from the beginning, we have tried to keep an open mind about where we land on products that will perform best for us. We've tried to be responsive to people who have reached out to us, but more than anything, we've tried to do our own research in the field and figure out what might be the best solution for us. One rule is we're not going to test anything that is not approved to be safe for both our riders and for the workforce. So that's a non-starter. But anything that is approved to be safe for our workforce and for our riders, and that we believe could potentially assist us in keeping the system as safe and clean and healthy as possible, we will generally take a stab at. So we are, running a UV pilot right now because we know that UV is a good disinfectant, and we have so we're looking at that. We've looked at some of the microbial sprays where the vendors claim that once you clean, disinfect, and then spray the surface with this microbial solution, that it will keep the surface free of viruses and bacteria for make up your amount of time, 15 days, 30, 60, 90 days. The jury is very much out on that. We have spoken to some people who experts and who very much believe in it, but we are not going to go big in that space until we are sure that it's the right place for us to be. We're also testing a variety of sprayers and dispensers so that we are both making sure that we are covering everything, but also we would like to find tools that make the job of our cleaners as easy as possible, so that to the extent possible, if people can carry things on their back as opposed to bending over all the time, we would like to accommodate that. And if they can spray as opposed to in an easier way, we'd like to accommodate that. So if you want specifics on the products and the names and the companies and the vendors, I'm sure we can get you some of that, but we're very much open to all kinds of solutions at this point, and we'll just land on whatever actually works.
Next question is from Dan Rivoli at New York One. Dan.
Hi, good afternoon. I had a question about just a few observations I saw and wanted to see if this was something you were all seeing around the system. One, I was at 207th Street on the A line. It's one of those stations you can lock up, but nobody locked it up. And then I was driving home. I saw someone enter a station just climbing over the thin red plastic strip that goes across it. And then earlier this morning, I was speaking with a homeless man who said he and the person he was with last night, once they got roused out of a station, they walked to a nearby station. So that's all to say, were there issues of people trying to enter the subway? How did the MTA deal with that? And then how, when the subways came back at 5 a.m., and we're already getting reports from commuters that there were homeless people back in the subway system sleeping. What does that do to the MTA's effort to clean and disinfect in the daytime? And what does it do to the overnight efforts that once it's 5 o'clock, it's back to normal, and you had all these gains in cleaning and disinfecting? And do you see that as effectively erased?
No, clearly not. So look, again, this is not going to be perfect. We're a massive, massive system with hundreds of stations and hundreds of entrances and exits and tunnels and nooks and crannies and stations and real estate and everything else. So this is why we've been clear from the beginning that this is not going to be perfect. So look, to answer your question on why some stations aren't locked, we are only going to lock stations where we are absolutely convinced that locking them is the safest thing to do, and that there is no risk whatsoever that we could potentially be locking someone in that needs to get out, because we're going to always prioritize egress. So if we believe that a cleaner could be arriving on a train and then need to exit through that station, then we're not going to take some risk where that person's not going to be able to get out. So we'll lock where we can, but we're not going to lock everywhere. I'm sure that folks entered the system when the system was closed last night. There's no way that we were perfect, so I'm not surprised by that. And it doesn't mean that our efforts are for naught. It means that we just keep trying to get better every single day.
On to Jose Martinez of the city. Jose.
Hi, everyone. We're aware that from what you said in past briefings that you have about 1,000 police personnel involved in securing the subway system and in clearing people out once it closes. How many police are involved in the bus end of the operation, and is the staffing at this point sufficient?
Sure. Do you want to take it, Pat?
So the bus, for this effort, the police were not directly had a planned engagement on the buses. That being said, the buses are routinely secured by the police that are out every day across all the neighborhoods in New York City. So the bus drivers know how to contact the police. They have panic buttons, et cetera. So that is a very ongoing routine process in order to protect that important workforce and the customers that ride those systems.
All right, we're going to move on to Paul Berger of the Wall Street Journal. Paul, you're up.
Thank you. Sarah, I was wondering if you could be a little bit more specific about the thousands of people who were asked to leave the system last night. Can you give us, are we talking 1,000, 2,000, or 4,000 people? And then the follow-up is, while, obviously the number 139 people accepting services is significant, doesn't that mean that, whatever that number is subtracted from the number of people thrown out of the system, those were people who were forced to spend last night on the streets? And, how does the MTA feel about that, especially with temperatures dropping in the next few days?
So my number, I'm going off of the NYPD number. I think it was the NYPD number that was released this morning, which was more than 2,000. So we did not try to do a count last night. But the NYPD apparently did some sort of rough estimate or rough count. So that's the number that I'm going off of. And I think your follow-up question was, for those who did not accept services, where did they go? And so to be clear, I think, so first of all, not every single person who left our system when the system closed is necessarily homeless and in need of social services. So, for example, I had a long conversation with a woman last night who was just completely surprised that the system was closed and just was not, had missed the news reports because she has a healthy relationship with the news and ignored it for a few days. And so we had a nice conversation, and her phone was dead. And so we had to go through the work of getting her where she needed to go, but without her knowing what was happening and realizing that the system was closed. So not every single person who left the system is in need of social services. Many of them are. Again, I'm not an expert on social services. We are a transportation agency. Every time I have a conversation with Steve Banks and others, I'm told that most folks who are in need of assistance need to have conversations over and over and over and over and over again before they're willing to take the offer of shelter or medical care. And so I'm going to go with the experts, and we'll just continue to do our work here and hope that it makes a difference over time. But, our North Star here has to be cleaning the system and disinfecting it. So that's what we're focused on, and we will assist on the social services side as much as we can.
Next question from Dave Colon of Streets Blog. Dave, you are up.
Hey, all. Just a really quick one. I was just curious if you could talk about how you're counting how many people are riding buses without collecting any fares.
Sure, Dave. So we have approximately 2,000 local buses with automatic passenger counters and about 500 or so express buses. So we typically use those all during the year. Our data folks have developed algorithms that can extrapolate some of that data. So again, what we tried to do last night is put out as many of those buses as we can, and then we extrapolated to fill in the blanks there. But we're confident in those numbers that we provided.
And the next question is from Clayton Gusa of the Daily News. Clayton.
Hi, everyone. I put in 3 questions earlier that have not been asked by my more charming colleagues, so if you'd kindly allow me to reel them off in the session, I'd appreciate it without muting me. First question, so when the subways are closed, you're still running the same timetables, but they're only used by cops and transit workers. Buses, you're increasing service overnight. So the first question is, how does the shutdown help you beef up cleaning when you're in fact running the same or more service overnight?
Sorry, I thought you were going to ask all of them. So we are continuing to run trains overnight. So we're doing a variety of things. We are moving transit employees to different locations. So we're moving people like maintenance workers around. We're moving cleaners to different stations, and then we're also moving trains to where cleaners are. We're switching out trains in terminals because we can't just have the same 2 trains sitting there the whole time getting cleaned and recleaned and not reaching other trains. We are running trains through the system for various safety reasons, including making sure we don't have a smoke condition in a tunnel, making sure we don't have a fire, making sure that we have eyes on what's happening in the tunnel generally. And then we're pre-positioning for the rush hour. So I disagree with the fact that we're running the exact same service, because we're not. So for example, last night there were a bunch of trains that stayed in terminals for longer so that they could be more thoroughly cleaned, so that they weren't necessarily leaving on time. So we are, there's greater flexibility there, but we are going to continue to move trains, because not only is there not enough room to just store them and then move cleaners to them to clean and disinfect them, but because we need to be moving them around the system for safety reasons anyway. And look, the bottom line is having everyone out of the system is the most useful piece of getting the entire system clean. Next question.
Got it. Yeah, next question. A lot of riders who ride the subway, both homeless or otherwise, who I spoke with, were very confused because they know the subway routes, but they don't know the bus routes. Why wasn't there any plan to run shuttle bus service that matches the subway line? Is that something you're considering putting on the table as you kind of move forward with it?
Sure. So, again, I go back to a basic premise that we saw after Superstorm Sandy. A bus system cannot take the place of a full subway system. Where we do it on subway shuttles, when we have outages, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of buses put in the place of the subway for a certain portion of a subway line. So the tack that we took, and we took a look very closely at the data. We work with hospitals, industry groups, as we said, where can we beef up our existing bus network, the network that customers are familiar with, and get the biggest bang for the buck? In other words, to accommodate those origins and destinations. So we enhanced 61 existing bus lines. So of those 61 bus lines, 24 of them do not operate during the 1 to 5 a.m. time frame. And the other 37 do, but we enhanced those headways. And many of them actually do mirror the subways. For instance, the one that I spoke of earlier, I was on the Q60, that was a replacement for a large portion of the E and the F line, right? We have the BX1 that mirrors the Grand Concourse. And we have many others across the city, and that's the tack we took to enhance our existing bus network and to replace the subway with routes that our customers are familiar with.
And then final question. Contractors at Flatbush, contract cleaners who are mostly made up of immigrants, were last night being paid $18 an hour to scrub the system of coronavirus. Now, Sarah, I know you've said that cleaners should get hazard pay, but that's still very much up in the air, especially in the private sector. And right now they're being paid pretty poorly. Do you think it's fair that these cleaners should be making such a low wage to disinfect the subway during a pandemic?
No, as you point out, I think that the folks who are cleaning our system, and particularly during a pandemic, should be given hazard pay. Their work is brutal, and so I think everyone who works for us should be given a fair wage.
Is $18 an hour a fair wage?
I think the folks who are cleaning our system should be paid hazard pay. I'm not going to debate the basics of what they start at, but I think they should be paid hazard pay at the moment.
All right, the next question is Shannon Ferry of New York One. Shannon, you're up.
Hi, Sarah. I know you talked about the 250 homeless number. Can you just clarify? Because we're hearing 2,000. So when you say 2,000, do you mean that's how many people willingly left the station without interaction from the NYPD? And secondly, can you elaborate if there was a certain bus station or route that saw a bigger crowds than others last night?
So here's my understanding of the numbers. My understanding of the numbers from, I think it was the NYPD who put the numbers out this morning. It may have been the mayor, but I think it was the NYPD who put the numbers out this morning, was that more than 2,000 people left the system. And all of those folks, when they are leaving the system, are, or I would say the huge majority of them are asked if they would like help, asked if they need help, asked if they would like to talk to an outreach worker or a social worker, asked if they need medical assistance, would they like to go to a shelter. Many decline that offer, many just move on. And my understanding is about 250 or more had long interactions with outreach workers and social workers. And of those 252, I think 139, I believe, took us up on the offer of transportation to a shelter or a medical facility.
All right, we're going on to Jose Martinez, back to Jose from the city, then Paul Berger, and then we're going to wrap it. So Jose, then Paul. Jose.
One question for you real quick here. Does the NYPD have any buses for moving homeless overnight, or is it just that they're going on to NYPD's buses, or I'm sorry, MTA's buses?
The short answer is the NYPD does not have its own buses. Sometimes they use or borrow our buses because they have bus drivers, and this is a sort of a standard practice for lots of different reasons, for funerals and things like that. So as we scramble to put together this program, as was described over the last 4 or 5 days, last night the NYPD did have some MTA buses that they had drivers in. That will not be the case tonight.
All right, thanks, Jose. Christopher Robbins had his physical hand up. If you've got a question, we're going to go right to you from Gothamist, Christopher Robbins.
Can you hear me?
We sure do. Ask away.
Could you talk a little bit more about what an extended interaction is? Like what qualifies that as an extended interaction? Because, we saw a lot of police asking people, do you want help? And there's a curt answer of no. So where is the cutoff for an extended interaction, and who's keeping that data? And also, were there any arrests or summonses issued last night over the course of the evening?
Sorry, what was the last part? Were there any instances of what last night?
Arrests or summonses, Sarah.
Okay, so on the first question, on the more extensive interaction, that's what I'm referring to. So when someone just declines, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about BRC or the New York City Homeless Services outreach workers or other social workers or nurses having a much longer conversation about, can we get you some help? Would you like to go to the shelter? Here are some options for you. Here's what that process consists of. Longer, thoughtful conversations where people are truly interacting with each other, not just an offer and then it's declined. So that's what I'm referring to. And the second question was about arrests and summons, and I'll to refer you to the NYPD and MTA police.
All right, we're going to go to Ben Kabak. Sorry, Pat Warren first, then Ben, we're going to go to you, then Paul, and we are done after that.
Your other question was who counts it or who's doing that, and it's the social workers that count and determine whether it was a meaningful interaction or not.
All right, Ben Kabak raised his hand from 2nd Avenue Sagas. Ben, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Thanks, guys. Just a quick question on an operations decision. I noticed last night when looking at the schedules that some of the trains that are reaching their terminals are in service after 1 a.m. but are exit only. Why was the decision made not to let people on at that point, especially if they're making in-system transfers? And how does that compare just with the way other systems run? Because I know London will let people get on and off the last train until it reaches the terminal.
Yeah, we looked at it, we contemplated it, and I'm not convinced that we won't tweak or change our mind going forward. But where we landed was because some of our travel from one end of line station to the other is so long, we did not want to end up in a place where people could be waiting on a platform for a train that left its origin prior to 1 a.m. and you could still be on a platform at, close to 2. And that gives us less of an ability to shut down the system and do the kind of cleaning that we wanted to do. So we may change how we're doing it going forward, because I can see it both ways, but we were trying to maximize the amount of time when we could clean.
All right, Paul Berger and then Mark Hallam from AM New York has decided to raise his hand. We're going to do professional courtesy, Mark. So Paul, then Mark, and then that is it. Paul.
Hi, this question is for Pat. The NYPD said yesterday that the MTA had hired private security to help last night. Could you tell me how many private security guards or people were used and why you needed them, given that you have your own police department?
Sure. We have private security on many locations across our property, regardless of whether we were using them last night or not. Again, this is an extraordinary effort in order to try to secure a system that has 472 stations out there. So we did augment the police in certain locations where a security presence would be valuable in order to make sure that we could monitor for vandalism and other things like that. And then they provide, if they run into an issue, their mission is to call the police, call 911 to call the police and get them into the location to take care of it. So there's a presence that's out there that helps us for eyes and ears to make sure that the system remains secure.
And the last question is from Mark Hallam of AM New York. Mark.
Hey, guys. I'm asking about Governor Cuomo. This morning he said that out of 1,000 new cases that the state was tracking, only 4% had been traced back to public transportation. I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, especially after such a big organizing effort to disinfect.
Honestly, Mark, I was unable to see the press conference today, and so that's news to me. I think I need to think about it a little bit. I did not realize that was said today.
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Sorry,
Thank you,
and
Sarah,
such a lame
Pat,
note.
and Craig. Good afternoon.
Thank you.